This happened when I was in junior high school. Our school had a new gymnasium built, and there was going to be a kind of concert with students performing to commemorate its completion. I was going to be playing the piano in front of everyone. All the students who weren't involved with the concert were told that they were banned from going into the new gym until after the concert. All of us performers were allowed access to practice in there. The music teacher had set up the stage for the show. It was pretty cool. I decided that I should practice more, so one night after tennis practice, I went to the gym by myself to work on my performance. It wasn't uncommon for kids to be at school until late, so I decided that I would stay till about 9 o'clock. When I got there, I quickly realized that I was going to be alone. No one else was around. This wasn't a bad thing for me because I didn't want to feel self-conscious about making a mistake in front of the other kids involved in the show. On that day, it had been raining from the morning, and it showed no signs of letting up. I remember that the sound of rain was almost drowning my piano out. The rain outside sounded so heavy. Just as I realized how loud the rain was, thunder rang out from above. It was such a loud sound, I remember thinking that lightning mustn't be too far away. Then, as predicted, lightning lit up the whole gymnasium. It was pretty scary, to be honest. The sound of thunder really resonated in there, and the way the lightning lit the whole place up, it made the brand new building feel like a haunted house. Suddenly, I was plunged into darkness. The gym had had a power outage. I couldn't read the music in front of me, so I couldn't keep practicing. I decided that all I could do was wait patiently until the lights came back on. It was so dark, I don't think I could have seen my hand in front of my face. Some sound was approaching. "Teacher?" I called out. My voice echoed in the empty gym. I thought that it must be one of the teachers. They must be here to see if anyone's in here. No one replied, but that noise drew closer. At that point, I realized I couldn't hear the noise of rain and thunder so much anymore. Whatever this noise was, its echoing sound around the empty gym was drowning rain and thunder out. I strained my eyes. I couldn't make out anything different around me. I could see pretty well now that my eyes had adjusted to the dark. No one was in my immediate vicinity, yet I could hear that footsteps sounding noise close by. It terrified me, so I leapt out of my chair and ran to the back of the stage. I guessed that fight or flight must have kicked in. I wanted to get my back against the wall. The footsteps approached, and I felt as if they stopped right in front of my face. Sweat was teeming down my forehead. There was nowhere else to run. I could hear it, pacing around in front of me. I felt something tug at the sleeve of my jumper. I was about to scream the new gym down. Then, from above, I heard the hiss of the floodlights starting up. I looked up and bright light filled my eyes. I closed my eyes as the brightness was jarring, and when I opened them, I saw our music teacher running towards me with a flashlight in hand. He asked me if I was okay. I can't remember if I was crying or not, but I probably was. He said that I had a really pale face though. He noticed something was strange with the piano. He said that the music sheets were wet, and there were wet handprints all over the piano. He stared at me and looked at my school uniform, and then at the sleeve of my jumper. It was wet. We had no explanation for what happened that day, but I'll never forget it. I always return to the same thought. What if the lights came on a couple of seconds later? This happened about 3 years ago, when I started living alone. I was eager to move out from my parents' house and stand on my own 2 feet. I saved up for a long time, and I was finally able to move out and into the city to start my life. I was really excited. Of course, I couldn't afford much, so I was constantly in search of cheap apartments. I'm not sure if you know about this, but in Japan there are so-called homes with histories. And that basically means some sort of fatal accident or crime happened within those walls. These properties are always the cheapest to rent, as most people don't want to live somewhere that they think is haunted. It's also generally established that the real estate agents must disclose the history of the property before anyone signs on the dotted line. Back in those days, I didn't really care about living in a property with a bit of history. I just wanted to live in the middle of the city, so I didn't hesitate. I knew a good deal when I saw one, and I rented one of those places, and I moved in as soon as I could. I used all the money I saved up to buy furniture and appliances. I also used some cash to decorate the apartment. I had it repainted. I made my new apartment my ideal apartment. I was so pleased with the way it turned out. The flooring was this lovely yellow and white pattern, so I didn't get new flooring put in. It was just such a perfect looking place. There was one bad point though, a huge dark stain in the center of the living room. I could imagine how that stain got there. No matter how many times I tried, I just couldn't get rid of it. At first, I didn't care about it, but after a week or so, I didn't like looking at it, so I bought a rug to cover it. Things were great after that. Well, at least for a while. One day I got home from work and went to the fridge to get a beer, but the fridge wasn't working. At first I thought my new fridge was broken, and I really didn't need that. I checked the plug, I did my standard test for any appliance, turn it off and turn it on again. When that didn't work, I unplugged it, then I plugged it back in, and I was relieved to hear the hum of electricity and feel the cold air start to flow. That was good news. I couldn't afford a new fridge. I took a mildly cold beer out of the fridge, drank it, then decided to take a bath. I went to draw my bath, but no hot water came out. So much for a home with a history. This was more like a defective home that the real estate company had duped me with. I was really angry. As the days went by, other strange things happened. The gas wouldn't light now and then for the fire, and sometimes the electric went out altogether. I started to wonder if my apartment really was haunted. A week or so later, I had a day off work and I planned on gaming all day and all night. I woke up in the morning and went to grab some breakfast, and I noticed a really weird smell. It smelled like fish and blood. It was really weird. It seemed to be coming from the living room. I didn't have any fish in the fridge, so I was completely puzzled. I tried to find the source of the odor, but I came up with nothing. I had no choice but to literally douse my entire apartment in Febreze. With the smell at bay, it was time to game. I played for so long I didn't even realize it was night when I glanced at my watch. I was hungry and I needed to go shopping, so I got up and headed to the door. This is the point where I'm going to have to briefly explain the floor plan of my apartment. When you open the front door, there's a long corridor, and if you don't put the lights on, then it's pretty much pitch black during the day, and especially at night. There's a toilet room on the right, and a bathroom just beyond that, again on the right. And then after that there's the door which leads to the living room area of my studio apartment. It's just the one room separated by a partition, and I have a really small balcony outside some sliding doors on the innermost side. So, there I went, to go get my shopping for dinner. I headed out of the lounge door and into the long hallway. It was dark as always, but something was different. Something was in that hallway with me. Something was in the dark there, in my apartment. Because it was so dim, I couldn't make out much, but there was something there. It was too dark to make out the figure of it, so I couldn't tell if it was a person or not. I just froze in place, and my heart began to race. I felt as if I could do nothing more than just stand there. I've never felt so helpless in my life. I felt the steady stream of air from the air conditioner blow against the sweat on the back of my neck. I was desperately considering my next move. I was thinking of turning the light on, and then I heard a massive thud. It sounded as if someone had pounded their fist against the wall or the door at the end of the corridor. My hand flew to the light switch and flipped it on instinctively. There was nothing there. Nothing in my hallway when I knew that there was something there only moments ago. However, I could smell that horrible bloody fish smell again the second the lights were back on. I have no way of knowing if this was completely imagined in my mind or if I had just had an encounter with something supernatural, but I know one thing. No matter how many times I tried, I couldn't get used to the dark again in that apartment. And believe me, I tried. But when the lights would suddenly go off or I could smell that dreadful smell, I knew that living there was impossible. I knew that I was never alone in that place. I called the real estate agent and told them that I would be moving out. Nowadays, I don't mess with homes with histories and I live a lot easier. But sometimes when it's dark and I approach a dimly lit hallway, I feel as if something is lurking in that darkness, peering at me, watching me. So, I leave the lights on where possible. This is a true experience which happened to me about 4 years ago when I was a student. Back then I was obsessed with cars and I spent every night driving through the mountains on various fun roads. On the night in question I went for a drive with 3 friends and one of them had spotted this little side road off to the mountain pass. One of them asked me if we wanted to check it out, and we did. We always drive around here, so it was weird that we didn't ever notice this little road before. I guess perhaps that it had been made recently by some heavy machinery driving into the woods. Maybe some construction was starting up in the area. We were feeling adventurous, so we headed down there. The car shook from side to side. There was no road in place. We continued for about 1 or 2 kilometers. And then we couldn't drive any further without risking damaging the car, so we got out and walked. There were trees everywhere. It felt like we were in the center of the woods. We kept going until we reached a clearing, and there was a pond up ahead. Beyond the pond, a dead end. The pond was oval-shaped, and a sign said that it was 2 meters deep. There was a wooden bridge which led out to the center. The water was really clear. There was all sorts of different life in there, many different plants. I remember thinking about how beautiful it looked, shimmering in the moonlight. We had spent about 20 minutes there when we were talking about leaving. In that instance, I heard a loud noise coming from behind me. One of my friends slipped into the pond. I was really surprised at first, but then I laughed when I saw him in the water. He laughed too, so I didn't feel too bad, and so did my other friend. I was just thinking about how we were going to make fun of him in front of all of our other friends. It had the makings of a great memory. When I looked back again at my friend in the water, I saw that he wasn't laughing. He was struggling and gasping for air. He looked like he was drowning. My friend shouted, "What's wrong?" "My legs! Something's got my legs! I'm being pulled! Help!" he replied. We looked at him as if he was joking, but he was serious. He looked in danger, so of course we all raced over there to try and pull him out. We couldn't lift him, he was really stuck in there. It was as if he was entangled in the pondweed or something. Then, as I was pulling him, I felt his body jolt back down towards the water. He was being pulled. All the laughter and smiles were long gone. This was a horrifying situation. Our friend was in danger, and we were alone in the woods. Then, with one final pull, we managed to free him. Then, I saw someone. I know I saw someone. They were floating face down, right behind our friend. Their body was dirty with the murky pond water, yet their skin was the color of snow. My first reaction was intense sadness. I nearly cried when I saw that body. I turned to see if my friends were seeing what I was seeing, and they were. Their faces were ghostly white, and their eyes were wide. I was suppressing my desire to run away. I needed to get my friend back on dry land. My friends and I pulled as hard as we could, and this is where things become very hard to explain. I saw it. My friends on the wooden bridge saw it, and my friend in the pond felt it for sure. As we pulled him out of the water, a white, pale hand was clasped around his ankle. We hauled him up, and we just ran for it as fast as we could back to the car. No one said a word until we were off the mountain pass. The silence was painful. When we finally saw the lights of the city up ahead, we started talking. My friend who fell in the pond, well, I don't know if he did actually fall. He said, "What was that?" I had no answer for him, so my other friend replied, "There was a woman holding onto your leg. She looked dead." We found out later that the pass was actually a famous suicide spot. The mountains either side of the pond make it a very secluded and quiet place. We don't drive out on those roads late at night anymore. Many years ago, I got a place at a university outside of my town. I decided that I would use my loan to rent my own place rather than live in a dorm. I was looking forward to living away from my parents for the first time, so I used some of the money I saved up to move to my university city a few months earlier. I needed to get the cheapest apartment I could since I didn't have a steady flow of income outside of the student loan. And of course I needed to save as much money as possible for the nights out drinking that I already planned. I didn't pay much attention to the area I was going to live in, or the apartment itself. I just wanted to get somewhere cheap and get uni life started. I was such a dumbass, I didn't really check the size of the place I was living in either. It was smaller than I expected. It was my own mistake, so I needed to take this one on the chin, but I remember feeling very alone and full of apprehension when I first moved in. I thought that the nerves were natural, but I remember breaking out in goosebumps all over on the first day, and sensing a kind of atmosphere in that apartment. I didn't like it in there at all. I wanted to leave immediately. But I knew that I couldn't move out on my first day, and I felt weak when I thought of running back to my parents, so I just had to put up with it. My mum was worried about me, so she called me that night. I expected she would. She always worried about me. She's slightly overbearing, but I love her. Her call was really helpful because I got a chance to complain about my new place and air my concerns. While we were deep in conversation, her voice glitched out a couple of times. It was really weird. I checked to see if it was an issue with my signal. My phone back in those days had an antenna, so I checked that. Yes, I'm old. I thought that signals were supposed to be better in cities. It was a shame because I loved talking on the phone. It was before the age of the smartphone, and it was all we had. Although it glitched a couple of times, the conversation continued, and we spoke about when we were going to see each other next. Just as we were getting back into the rhythm of chatting, the lights in the apartment suddenly went out. It really creeped me out since I'm a total wuss. But after a few nervous moments, the lights came back on. I was nervously chatting to my mum until I realized that the line had been cut. I thought she had hung up. I remember that night thinking about how horrible the vibe was in this new place as I lay in my bed. I didn't even want to sleep, but eventually I drifted off. Since the first day I moved in, strange things went down in that apartment. Every time I had a phone call, it did that weird glitch thing. It was really frightening. I would hear strange and eerie noises every day, and my mood was always really low. All that stuff I was excited about doing when university started didn't excite me anymore. I felt as if I was slipping into some form of depression. It progressed to the point where even my dreams were affected. I had nightmares. I couldn't remember much from those awful dreams I woke from, except one thing. There was always a man. In the nightmares, he looked to be about 40 years old. He really frightened me. I couldn't figure out why. You know, he looked almost familiar. Like, he wouldn't look out of place in a crowd. He wasn't creepy looking, he just looked like someone you'd walk past on the street. His skin looked slightly graying and his eyes were sunken. I hated those nightmares. He just stood there, staring at me. This was all within the first month I lived in that apartment. I had just gotten used to my new life as a student. You know, travel, studying, workload management, etc. There was just one thing I couldn't get used to. The apartment. University was a place of calm and my home life was just full of tension. I decided that I needed to clean the place up, so I opened up my window as wide as I could to allow for maximum airflow for dusting. I am pretty bad at cleaning. I don't really like it, so I'm ashamed to say that this was the first time I was going to be cleaning up since I moved in. I needed to grow up, and I thought that cleaning up and becoming more organized would be a great place to start. I decided that I was going to make my apartment spotless. Well, first things first, I needed to get rid of all the cardboard boxes from the move. I hadn't even unpacked my boxes yet. I went to open the closet, and when I did, I was completely shocked by what I saw. There were hundreds of these religious scribbles, cuttings, and seals plastered all over the inside of the closet. There was also some weird red writing on the ceiling in there too. I noped out of there. I have no idea why those things were in the closet, but at a guess I would say that they were a preventative method for hauntings. Like, if you went in the closet, you would be safe from something. With that lingering on my mind, I knew that I couldn't live there anymore. I wanted to know what happened there, and thankfully I was friendly with one of my neighbors, so I asked some questions about what went on in there. It turns out that a former resident took their own life in my apartment. I was shocked when she told me that the person who lived there before me was a man in his 40s. Could he have been the man from my nightmares? I often wonder if he was trying to tell me something. What was the deal with those religious things in the closet? Why were they still even there? I wonder what was going on in his mind. Maybe he was the thing I was supposed to hide in the closet from. I have so many unanswered questions. Of course, I don't live there anymore, but every time the signal cuts out just for a second, or I hear some sort of voice distortion, I shudder and think of that apartment and that closet. I have been a taxi driver for 27 years, and I've seen and experienced some pretty strange and frightening things in my time on the road. Of all the things that I've seen, this is either number 1 or number 2. I think it was about 3 a.m. I was heading back to the taxi rank after I dropped off a customer on a long-distance run. I work in a rural town, and we don't often get many customers after midnight. Only a few drivers work that time of night. I was driving through some forest roads. Tall cedar trees were either side of the road. I could hear the crickets chirping, and for some reason, I had a bad feeling well in the pit of my stomach. I felt intense sadness wash over me, like I was being smothered by misery. I felt like I was suffocating in my own car. Since that night, I have heard that you usually get that feeling when something bad is about to happen. I decided to distract myself by turning up the radio, but try as I might, I couldn't shake that feeling. Then I realized something. I was heading towards the dam. There was a bridge near that dam, and according to local legends, it's a major hotspot for paranormal activity. The locals don't go anywhere near that bridge at night because of all the rumors that surround it. I have my own experiences with that dam too. I had a passenger who wanted to end it all one night. I stayed up half the night persuading him not to do it. I gave him some money, 10,000 yen. That's about $85 US. and then I took him to the train station by the time the sun came up. I told him to give life another try and go somewhere new or visit a friend or a family member. 3 days later, he was found floating face down in the dam below the bridge. Sorry, story got away from me there. Anyway, I don't usually drive around that area at night, so I was a bit creeped out. I don't know why, because in the middle of the day it's just another road, right? But at night, it was something else, especially that night. Well, as you might expect, there were no other cars or people in the area. I was thinking about just turning around and going a different way back to the taxi rank, but I realized it would be such a waste of time. I had come this far, and it was too late to turn back now. I had to drive over that bridge. After leaving the cedar forest, I approached the dam. There was very little light out there. The street lights are so dim on the bridge. I was about halfway over the bridge when I saw the shadow of a person stood by the guardrail. It was a man. I shuddered. There were only 2 types of person that man could be. A person about to jump, or some sort of apparition. If it was a guy who was thinking of jumping, then I don't think I could have slept easy for the rest of the night without pulling over and asking if he was alright. I pulled into the hard shoulder, and I stopped my taxi. I got a closer look at the man. He looked to be about 60 years old, and he was well dressed. At a guess, I would say that this guy had some sort of financial issues, and he was considering his options. He was making some sort of motion with his hands towards the dam. It was very eerie that time of night to see him there doing that. Strange doesn't even begin to describe it. I thought he was scattering fish food or something. You know when you toss bread or fish flakes in a pond? It was that kind of motion. I lowered my passenger seat window and called out to him. Excuse me, sir." He just glanced over his shoulder and stared at me briefly and went back to what he was doing. "What are you doing out here so late, sir?" I asked. He said nothing. I got a bit frustrated and got out of the car and went to approach him. I know he heard me coming because I didn't exactly creep up. He still didn't even acknowledge my presence. It was so strange that I couldn't help stand there and watch him. I realized that he was scattering tiny pieces of paper into the dam below. I thought it was money for a second, but then I realized that the paper had these weird squiggles on it. Why on earth was he out here at 3 a.m. doing this? I looked over the side of the bridge into the dam, and I really wished that I hadn't. I saw something terrible down there. I saw eyes peering up at us. From the ebbing darkness below, shapes shifted and swirled, and all I could make out were eyes. There were eyes so angry yet sad at the same time. Lost and confused, shadowy expressions writhed away from the paper the old man was scattering. I felt sick. I had to turn away. And I was met by the old man's stare, and he finally opened his mouth. "If you don't do this, sometimes they come back." I got in my car and sped away. I haven't been back to the dam since, night or day. Strange things happen when towns and cities sleep, out there in the wild woods.